initially called climate skeptics. I said, but all scientists are skeptics. If you're not a skeptic, you're not a scientist. And then when that didn't work, then they came out with the charge that we were climate change deniers. And of course, I laugh about that now because my whole career has been anything but a climate change denier. I've spent my career trying to educate people to how much climate change is naturally. So I'm anything but a denier, but of course that is part of the politics.
More than 31,000 scientists from across the United States, including more than 9,000 PhDs from the fields of climatology, atmospheric science, earth science, and hydrology, signed a petition rejecting man-made global warming as a scientific fraud. This shattered the hoax of the so-called consensus that the mainstream media had been pushing for years, that every scientist on Earth believed that man-made global warming was a fact.
When Gore said the science is settled, that raised red flags amongst the media and then also amongst a lot of other people that sort of knew that that wasn't true, other scientists, and started to look at it. And of course, the more they looked at it, the more they realized, no, science is never settled.
Indicative of that is ClimateGate, all of the exposure of fraud within the science that has just been swept under the rug. Nobody cares. I mean, they can say, oh, just forget about it. The government is paying no attention, is moving forward on cap and trade, when clearly we should not be shooting ourselves in the foot economically with a bill that pays you to limit carbon dioxide when it's clear that carbon dioxide doesn't matter a whit.
Richard Lindzen, an MIT professor of atmospheric physics, said it many years ago when he said the consensus was reached before the research had even begun. And then scientists like myself that stood up and said, hold on a minute, I got problems with it. Oh, paid by the oil companies, don't trust that guy.
In light of the exaggeration and the revelations that resulted from ClimateGate, it's clear that there's a lot of deception going on. Why do you think that is? Do you think it's that people are deluded, or do you think that they're pushing this for some particular reason?
Nobody can tell what goes on in the minds of anyone else. Mm-hmm. Recognition, government grants, ego, who knows? But obviously they've gone to excessive degrees that cross the line of ethics.
You're from Sovereignty International. Why are you here at a global warming conference?
Well, first of all, I have a PhD in which I've led a multi-million-dollar research effort in global warming, so I'm intimately familiar with it. While I was conducting that research, it became very obvious to me that the science behind the man-caused global warming was not there. It just was not there, and that was in the 1990s, and there's even less evidence today. So one of the things that I have been doing since that time is to try to help people understand what the true science of global warming is, and to promote different things like this conference to bring more real truth out so that people can understand more effectively what this is about, because it's not about science, it's not about the environment, it's about politics.
Okay, and could you explain a little bit, what do you think the political agenda is behind this?
The political agenda is threefold. First of all, it's the economic, the greed aspect. A lot of companies are involved because they realize they can go to the government trough, rent seekers, and actually get tremendous amounts of government subsidies and so forth for the development of alternative renewable energy, as well as the cap and trade aspect that the government will give them the credits that they can then sell to their competitors and so forth at a profit. Then you have those who are true believers in the fact that no matter what you say, they're not going to be convinced that we're not causing global warming that's going to destroy the earth. Those are the radical environmentalists and so forth. Then you have the politicians that are advancing, one, their own political career, or two, there is this international agenda to create world government, or what they call global governance. And as a consequence, and that's one of the things that Sovereignty International is truly interested in, is the loss of sovereignty to an international organization such as we would have had the Copenhagen conference been more successful last December.
And we know historically that the global governance the sort of agenda to these issues is very hard to try and is with all the best intentions, it's very hard to actually activate.
And do you expect future efforts to further that agenda?
Oh yes, they're not going to give up. One of the things that we have found over the last 30 years is that the drive for creating this global governance, as they call it, has been underway for a long time. And when they fail in one area, they'll either rename it or they'll come at it from a different direction. So they're not going, I mean, there's billions of dollars involved in this, and they're not going to give up.
I think that we are living in terrifying times at the moment. We see environmentalism being used as a means under the cloak of ecological righteousness to bring in a form of one world government. They don't call it that. They see it as the United Nations and bodies like the United Nations taking responsibility for an issue so serious that it cannot be dealt with by sovereign governments, and that therefore unelected bureaucrats and experts should be allowed to govern our existence. They are using energy as a way of rationing scarce resources, making them more scarce, engineering scarcity in order to impose government control, increase taxation. This is a liberty issue ultimately, and we should all be very afraid, and we should all think very hard about the fight ahead of us. And we should marshal our forces, because these are dark times we live in. Yeah, it's serious.
So in your speech today that you gave on the constitutionality of issues concerning climate change, I was hoping you would make additional comments on the imposition of a global governing body to impose taxes and regulations.
Well, that, of course, is totally contrary to what the founders' intent was with the Constitution. The Constitution is oriented towards the United States of America and its common defense and its general welfare, and not towards any kind of international government. They would, as I think a person, have worried very, very seriously about any kind of international government. In a sense, they fought against an international government. The British government that was ruling the colonies was an international government. It was one of the largest that the earth has ever seen, and it didn't work. It didn't work because people lost their liberty and lost their property as a consequence of this.
And do you think that there's a serious threat of that being imposed at this moment?
Well, I'm not sure it is, although that we have a president and administration that is much more inclined towards international organizations than they are towards the Constitution. And so that is a danger that we have to be careful of.
Are you concerned about the imposition of a global government?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, and you see that as a serious threat?
Yeah, I mean, just look at the UN. It's a complete travesty. The last thing that would be, I mean, it would be completely destructive it would be the end of freedom in the world if we had some form of global government.
And you're seeing an active push for that through the environmental movement?
Well, I mean, certainly there's a push for global governance on particular issues. I think to the extent that they could parlay that into broader control, I think they would like that.
He who controls energy controls the economy. When you get to a position where government is deciding how expensive your energy is, what energy you can use and can't use, they have control of the economy. Once they have control of the economy, they have control of the way people earn their livings, how individuals survive. They control everything. We are no longer free to make our own decisions about our lives.
Okay, could you in any way, as much as possible, identify this they? The they that is pushing for this global government?
Yes, primarily it's the major international or transnational corporations. and the transnational financial institutions that are basically centralized in every nation's or every region's central bank. In us, it's the U.S. Federal Reserve, which is not a U.S. organization at all. It's an independent organization that's controlled primarily by Europeans, by the way.
Okay, and do you see elements of it also within the Obama administration and the UN, the European Union?
I see within the Obama administration a willingness to go along with this. I can't say that they're deliberately advancing this agenda, but because they have a progressive liberal mentality, basically predisposes their way of thinking to realize that we need to have more government both at the national level and the international level, which feeds right into the concept of a world global governance. And as a consequence, they're promoting it, whether or not they're doing it deliberately or just by accident because of their ideological beliefs. I'm not going to get into because I can't. But it's one of those things where they are contributing greatly to it. And of course, the United Nations itself has hundreds of documents on how they want to create global governance. So they're doing it deliberately.
Do you think that the threat is present in current administrations?
Yes, in Obama administration, in the Cameron administration in Britain, in the European Union, across the world. I see very little sign of the fight back happening at the moment. It's got to happen. We cannot let our liberty be curtailed in this way.
If their plan is successful, every nation on Earth will not only pay tribute to the powerful world government, but every facet of human life will be regulated by the technocratic global planners.